Is a short overview of how we can configure the agents right now. So right now you have to go into the patient, go here, configure agents, and then you can see all of your agents, right? So just a quick rundown on how the agents work. You're basically giving the system prompt in this section here, right? So for this clinical fast, you're a clinical assistant, you're providing chart review for patient name, patient age, patient gender, right? And we're giving some context right here. So this is essentially what I mean when I'm saying context engineering. We're giving some context to the agent. And there's only a little bit of prompting about the actual behavior of the agent here. So it's like source truth just from that snapshot, be concise, right? Nothing super specific to a clinical fast agent. Just, I think what's really important is what it's going to be looking up, right? So this is the system prompt. And so now, okay, to get into how the orchestrator actually works, we want to go over to the decision tree, right? So essentially what the orchestrator does is it starts up here, and it's going to start at the root node, right? The root here. So what it's going to ask first, if you click on any node, so for example, I click on the root, it's going to pull up some information here on the right side, right? So what the orchestrator does first is it essentially gets this question. Do you need to give the user data or interpret data, right? Essentially, do you need deep reasoning or not? Obviously, this question, I think, can be massively improved. I think it's not specific enough. But anyways, it's saying, do you need to give the user data or interpret data? The reason I'm saying it might not be specific enough is because technically to interpret data, you also need to give data. So there's a blurring of the lines here. So I think we can be more specific. But yeah, essentially it's going to ask this question, and then right now there's two options that the orchestrator can answer. You can either interpret data, right? So it can interpret, which is going to bring it to here, to reasoning type, or retrieve data, which is going to bring it this way, okay? So just to see how we can actually change this, maybe instead of saying, do you need to give the user data or interpret data, does this query require deep reasoning? Right? Obviously, this is also vague because what is deep reasoning? But just to show we can kind of change the questions, right? Does this query require deep reasoning? We could say yes, right? So we can edit the options, right? So we can say yes, it does. And to explain a little bit more about what yes means, we can write down here. The question asks for reasoning, analysis, recommendations, next steps, differential diagnosis, or a plan of action, right? And so then you can essentially choose whether or not it's going to go to a node, which is going to be another question, or a leaf, an agent, which is the agent, right? So right now we're directing it to a node, which is essentially asking, is it administrative or clinical? That's the reasoning type. But this is how you can answer these, right? And then this one, we can change this to no, right? The question, we'll say the question simply, the user's query simply asks for values, information, data, patient documentation. And again, we'll go to this retrieval type node, right? So just as another thing, we can actually have more than two options, right? So for example, we could just say neither. We could say the user's query is not related to medicine or administration, right? Just as an example, and we could say let's go to an agent, and we want to route it to a non-medical agent. We'll see that now we can go three ways, right? Here we can go yes, yes, no, no, or neither, which is going to bring us to this non-medical agent, right? That's just an example. We can go ahead and delete nodes as well, so it'll take it out of the tree. And then, right, we can do the same thing for these nodes, right? So what the issue is with these is that essentially these questions that are being asked to the orchestrator are not even questions at all, right? If you look at this, it says, it's giving kind of this weird, I don't know how this got put in here, but it's just giving this weird like description essentially. It should basically be asking, and I don't know what this is saying, no, right? Right, it essentially should be basically asking, is this a clinical or administrative question, right? That's essentially what the question should be. And our options are administrative, complex administrative reasoning, or the clinician's asking a clinical question, right? So those are our options. So that's what the question should be, right? Same thing here. Again, there's this weird prompt that really has nothing to do with a question. We want it to be just basically asking, is this a clinical, right? Clinical, or administrative question. Okay, save that. So that's essentially how we can configure the agents, and that is the non-deterministic way that the orchestrator chooses agents. However, there is also a deterministic component to this. If we go back to agents, we have this shortcuts right here, which is essentially if this phrase is found within the query, then it's actually going to go straight to this agent, right? So if I ask, for example, what is the latest, the orchestrator is not going to go through the decision tree. It's actually just going to go straight to this agent, right? So just kind of as an example of that, if I say, what is the latest A1C on the patient? It's going to go straight to clinical fast, right? It didn't even essentially call the orchestrator because, well, the orchestrator just knew instantly give it to clinical fast, right? Boom, latest hemoglobin A1C is this. We're giving some context here, right? Just because I think EvidenceMD is routed to do that, right? But I think that might not be necessary in the future. But yeah, we can see that's what we do for those deterministic choices. But if I were to say like, how does the patient's A1C trend impact their insurance, for example, let's ask this question and we're going to deploy. See, now we can tell it's thinking for a little longer, right? So the orchestrator is actually taking a little more time to figure out which agent to use. And it looks like we're going to go fall back to the clinical fast here. So yeah, that we might need a little bit of engineering in this, essentially in this, and this also might be related to the fact that the last question was what was the latest A1C. But yeah, we can see how it relates to the insurance understanding. So it does get the question. But yeah, we need to essentially figure out this engineering of the tree. And I hope that this was helpful to explain a little bit of how that works.